Heidi Dutton. Just days before Christmas, 2022, a 17-year-old Eagle Scout in Oklahoma helped orchestrate the deaths of the grandparents who had rescued her from foster care and adopted her as their own daughter. The bodies lay buried beside the family swimming pool for an entire month before anyone discovered what had happened, and a Ring doorbell camera captured it all. Larry Dutton was a 73-year-old retired Master Staff Sergeant in the United States Air Force who had served as airport manager at Lieutenant William M. Milliken Airport in Eureka, Kansas. His wife, Deborah, 67, was also a retired Air Force Staff Sergeant and former chef. The couple lived in Dewey, Oklahoma, approximately 50 miles north of Tulsa, and they had taken in their biological granddaughter from the foster care system to give her a better life. Heidi Dutton appeared to thrive under their care. She earned the rank of Eagle Scout just 1 year before the events that would send her to prison. She was dating a 20-year-old named Lucas Anthony Walker of Bartlesville, a citizen of the Cherokee Nation. When investigators later asked Heidi why she wanted her grandparents gone, she offered no coherent explanation beyond stating she simply no longer wanted them around. On the night of December 19, 2022, Walker entered the Dutton home while Larry and Deborah slept. He retrieved a .22 caliber pistol from a gun safe in the garage and waited in Heidi's bedroom. When Deborah opened the bedroom door, Walker shot her in the face and then cut her throat. Larry rushed Walker in an attempt to stop him, but the pistol jammed when Walker tried to fire again. Walker pulled a knife and inflicted multiple stab wounds to Larry's face, chest, and stomach. Court documents reveal a harrowing detail from Heidi's own confession. Larry was still alive and crawling toward his deceased wife during the cleanup. Heidi and Walker wrapped both bodies in bedsheets, carried them outside, and buried them in shallow graves near where the family's above-ground pool had been. Ring doorbell footage captured the dragging of at least one body across the deck. In the weeks that followed, the pair spent the victim's money as though nothing had happened. On January 19, 2023, Washington County Sheriff's Deputy Darren Jorgensen responded to a welfare check after neighbors and family grew concerned. He could not locate the couple, but reported the unmistakable smell of decomposing flesh on the property. A search warrant executed the following day revealed blood-stained jewelry, blood-spattered walls, bloodied clothing, and blood that had seeped under the baseboards in the master bedroom despite cleanup attempts. Both Heidi and Walker were present at the residence and were taken into custody. Both confessed. How does someone who was given a second chance at life by the very people who loved her most repay that kindness with such calculated violence? Heidi was charged as an adult in Washington County District Court with 2 counts of first-degree murder with deliberate intent, 2 counts of desecration of a human corpse, and 1 count of conspiracy. Bail was set at $2 million. Walker's case was tried separately in federal court because of his Cherokee Nation citizenship under the McGirt v. Oklahoma Supreme Court ruling. Walker pleaded guilty on May 29, 2024, to 2 counts of second-degree murder in Indian country, and was sentenced on January 24, 2025, to 420 months, or 35 years, by U.S. District Judge John D. Russell. Heidi pleaded not guilty initially, but entered a guilty plea on May 8, 2025, to all 5 counts. On June 6, 2025, she was sentenced to life in prison. Under Oklahoma law, she must serve 85% of a 45-year term, approximately 38 years, before parole eligibility. District Attorney Will Drake stated the plea was designed to spare the victim's family the trauma of trial and years of appeals. As of April 2026, Heidi Dutton is incarcerated in the Oklahoma prison system at approximately 20 years old. Her earliest possible parole eligibility is around 2060. Lucas Walker is serving 35 years in federal prison with the Bureau of Prisons. The Dutton case involved premeditation and betrayal, but the next case arose from a confrontation that spiraled out of control in a matter of seconds. Marissa Smith. On a September afternoon in 2022, a planned fight among teenagers at a small-town Ohio park escalated fatally when 17-year-old Marissa Grace Smith pulled a knife from her brother's waistband and drove it into the chest of a 22-year-old man. He bled out on the grass, while she and others left without calling for help. Michael Devin Morris Jr., 22, of the Alliance area in Stark County, Ohio, was known to some of the teenagers as Devin. The confrontation at Wildwood Park stemmed from previous unresolved conflicts, reportedly related to whether Smith had been spat on. What was supposed to be a fight between teenagers became something far worse. Marissa Grace Smith lived in Louisville, Ohio, a small city in Stark County. Her 15-year-old brother, whose name was withheld due to juvenile status, served as co-defendant in the case. He provided the knife that would end Morris's life. On September 13, 2022, at approximately 4 p.m, a group of teenagers gathered at Wildwood Park at 500 Sturzbach Avenue in Louisville for the planned confrontation. During the altercation, Smith's brother was being beaten by a group of boys, including Morris. Smith took a knife from her brother's waistband. Multiple witnesses testified she moved toward the unarmed Morris while holding the knife and screaming at him. Morris sustained a single stab wound to the left chest and collapsed. Smith and the others left without calling for help. A patrolling officer was flagged down by a civilian who reported the incident. First responders attempted life-saving measures before transporting Morris to Cleveland Clinic Mercy Hospital in Canton, where he was pronounced dead. Louisville Police Detective John Pilla led the investigation. 3 juvenile witnesses described seeing a girl with darker hair and braces inflict the wound. Pilla went to Smith's home and got her to agree to speak at the police station without her parents or an attorney present. In her first interview, Smith said she could have done it but did not remember. In a subsequent interview, she said Morris put his hands up or pushed her, lunged at her, and then he got stabbed. When someone is bleeding out on the ground and you have a phone in your pocket, what does it say about a person that they choose to walk away? On October 13, 2022, Stark County Family Court Judge David Nist transferred Smith's case to adult court. Under Ohio law, when a juvenile court judge finds probable cause for this type of offense against a 16 or 17-year-old, transfer is mandatory. The 4-day trial began May 8, 2023, before Stark County Common Pleas Judge Natalie Haupt. Prosecutors Margaret Scott and Richard Nicodemo argued Smith aggressively moved toward the unarmed Morris with the knife, while defense attorney Caitlin Shoemaker argued the incident was accidental and chaotic. Smith testified the victim ran into the knife. The prosecution's closing was blunt: guilty all day long. On May 12, 2023, the jury found Smith guilty of felony charges after approximately 3 hours of deliberation. Smith broke into sobbing. At sentencing on May 22nd, Judge Haupt sentenced Smith to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years, the mandatory minimum under Ohio law. The judge stated she was sure there were a lot of regrets that Ms. Smith had, but those mistakes cost Michael Morris his life. Morris's relative, Tara Burns, delivered a devastating victim impact statement. "You had a phone and you stabbed him in the chest. You could have called anonymously and told them that someone was down, but you chose to leave him to die." As of April 2026, Marissa Grace Smith is incarcerated in the Ohio prison system, approximately 20 to 21 years old, serving life with parole. Eligibility after 15 years. Her earliest parole eligibility is approximately 2037 to 2038. A knife ended one life in Ohio, but in Michigan, a different blade would inflict over 100 wounds on Christmas Day. Delilah Sherwood Evans. On Christmas Day, 2016, 17-year-old Delilah Sherwood Evans inflicted 124 stab wounds on her wheelchair-bound mother inside their Michigan apartment. She mounted an insanity defense at trial, claiming she believed her mother was a witch with two heads. The jury rejected it. But years later, an appeals court would vacate her conviction entirely. Not because she was innocent, but because the prosecutor crossed a line. Sonia Ryong, 45, was Delilah's mother. She was mobility impaired and used a wheelchair following a car accident years prior. She was a fan of Korean soap operas and lived with her daughter in a two-bedroom apartment in the Washington Place complex in Clinton Township, Macomb County. Delilah had a documented history of mental health issues, but had never been formally diagnosed before the crime. Her sister Rosanna later stated they were unfortunately not able to get her any of the help she needed. Before the incident, her brother reported she spoke of having a dark angel and hearing voices. 2 weeks before the events of that Christmas, Sonia brought Delilah to a local hospital for a psychiatric evaluation because she was acting erratically. Delilah was discharged after a brief evaluation and never seen by a psychiatrist. Police had been called to the apartment 3 prior times for family trouble involving Delilah. 2 months before, she had allegedly harmed her brother's hand with a knife. On December 25, 2016, Delilah attacked her mother repeatedly with a kitchen knife. She later described being angry and stabbing her mother's back and chest, smothering her with a pillow, and when those efforts did not end her life, focusing on her neck. She had hidden knives beforehand so her mother could not see them. After the attack, Delilah showered, used bleach to clean blood from surfaces, placed a blanket over her mother's body, and left the apartment. She went to a nearby convenience store, wrapped in a blanket, and asked the clerk to call police, claiming she was homeless. During her custodial interview, Delilah admitted to the act, but intermittently devolved into delusional rambling. She claimed Sonia was not her real mother, but a witch named Helen, who had 2 heads, who had kidnapped her. She said her father was Satan, and that gnats flew out of her mother's stomach during the attack. When lodged in the Macomb County Jail, the jail's director of mental health found her actively psychotic, experiencing delusions and hallucinations, and she was prescribed antipsychotic medications. What happens when a system fails to provide treatment until after the unthinkable has already occurred? Delilah was charged with 1 count of first-degree premeditated murder. 2 experts testified for the defense. Dr. Megan Rowland of the Center for Forensic Psychiatry interviewed Delilah for over 6 hours and concluded she was legally insane, lacking the substantial capacity to appreciate the nature and quality of her actions. Dr. Stephen Miller diagnosed schizoaffective disorder, bipolar type. The prosecution presented no expert witness, instead relying on cross-examination to argue that Delilah's cleanup behavior showed logical thinking. On February 22, 2018, the jury rejected the insanity plea and found Delilah guilty but mentally ill of first-degree premeditated murder. On April 5, 2018, Macomb County Circuit Court Judge Richard Coretti sentenced her to life without parole. The judge stated he could not imagine how someone could plunge a knife 120 times into a mother who raised and nurtured them. On appeal, the Michigan Court of Appeals, on December 17, 2020, vacated Delilah's conviction and ordered a new trial. The court found the prosecutor's cross-examination of Dr. Rowland constituted misconduct. The prosecutor had likened her to a cartoon character, accused her of writing her report in crayon, and baselessly accused her of withholding evidence. The court wrote that the prosecutor's unprofessional and unethical conduct led to the first-degree conviction of a mentally ill defendant. As of April 2026, the outcome of any retrial or plea agreement following the December 2020 appellate ruling could not be confirmed through available public records. Under Michigan's evolving juvenile sentencing law and the Miller v. Alabama framework, Delilah may also have been eligible for resentencing considerations. She would be approximately 26 to 27 years old. Mental illness played a central role in the Evans case. But the next story involves a different kind of broken system, one that failed to protect a child from years of exploitation. Sarah Cruzan. At 16 years old, Sarah Cruzan walked into a Riverside, California motel room and took the life of the man who had been exploiting her since she was a child. The prosecution painted her as a calculated criminal. Advocates saw a trafficking victim who saw no other escape. And for the next 2 decades, her case would become a symbol of how the justice system fails the most vulnerable, before ultimately becoming a story of redemption. Sarah Jessamy Cruzan was born January 8, 1978, and raised by her mother in Riverside in conditions of poverty and abuse. She was an honor roll student who ran track. Her mother was addicted to drugs and admitted to physically abusing her. Sarah was placed in foster care after bruises were discovered. She experienced abuse by her mother's boyfriends during early childhood and met her incarcerated father only 3 times. She suffered severe depression resulting in multiple hospitalizations. George Gilbert Howard, known as GG, was approximately 36 years old and operated as a trafficker in the Riverside area. He began targeting Sarah when she was a child, presenting himself as a surrogate father figure before exploiting her for commercial purposes. By the time she was 13, he had begun trafficking her, forcing her into exploitation while collecting the proceeds. Sarah later described feeling trapped, knowing that running away would mean returning to a home where no one was equipped to protect her. A week before the events at the motel, Sarah moved into a house in the Rubidoux area belonging to James Earl Hampton, a convicted felon connected to her boyfriend. Hampton, learning of Sarah's history with Howard, ordered her to end Howard's life and take his money, threatening that if she did not do it, he would harm her mother. On March 9, 1994, Sarah arranged to meet Howard at the Dynasty Suites Motel on Iowa Avenue in Riverside. On March 10th, when Howard began to assault her, Sarah shot him in the neck at close range. She took approximately $1,500 from his wallet and the keys to his Jaguar, inadvertently leaving her identification card and purse in the room. On March 14, 1994, Sarah was arrested at a home in Pomona, California. She confessed to police. The Riverside County District Attorney chose to have her tried as an adult despite a California Youth Authority evaluation, concluding she was amenable to the training and treatment offered by the juvenile system, and despite the fact she had never been arrested before. Hampton, the man who allegedly ordered the act, was never prosecuted. Can a teenager who has been victimized for half her life be held to the same standard of culpability as someone who acts without such a history? During trial, Sarah's history of trafficking and abuse was not admitted into evidence, and she was not allowed to speak about it. On May 11, 1995, a Riverside Superior Court jury found Sarah guilty of first-degree murder with 2 special circumstances. In September 1995, she was sentenced to life without parole plus a 4-year firearm enhancement. She was 17 years old. Sarah was incarcerated at Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla. In 2009, a Human Rights Watch interview brought national attention to her case and went viral. Senator Leland Yee advocated for her release for 11 years. Pro bono attorneys from Perkins Coie worked her case for 5 years. On January 2, 2011, Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger commuted her sentence to 25 years to life. On January 18, 2013, a deal reduced her conviction to second-degree murder with a sentence of 19 years to life, effectively time served. On June 12, 2013, she was found suitable for parole at her first hearing. On October 31, 2013, Sarah Cruzan walked out of prison after serving approximately 19 years. On July 1, 2022, Governor Gavin Newsom granted her a full pardon. As of April 2026, Sarah Cruzan is 48 years old and free. She lives in California with her daughter, Summer. She is an activist for incarcerated women's rights and juvenile sentencing reform. She published her memoir, I Cried to Dream Again: Trafficking, Murder, and Deliverance in May 2022. She is the inspiration behind Sarah's Law, a bill allowing federal courts to sentence juveniles convicted of violent offenses against their traffickers below statutory minimums. Sarah's story ended with freedom and purpose. But the next case involves a betrayal so complete that the perpetrators lived among the grieving for years. Karen Severson and Laura Doyle. Missy Avila was 17 years old when her two closest friends led her into the woods, held her head underwater in 6 inches of creek water, and placed a 100-pound log on her body to keep her submerged. For nearly 3 years, Karen Severson and Laura Doyle played the roles of grieving friends. Karen's deception was so elaborate that she moved into the Avila family home as a surrogate daughter. The performance was convincing enough that no one suspected them until guilt finally cracked the silence. Michelle Yvette Avila, known as Missy, was born February 8, 1968, and lived in Arleta in the San Fernando Valley with her mother Irene, father Ernest Sr., and 3 brothers. She attended San Fernando High School and was described as popular, outgoing, and petite at 4 feet 11 inches and 97 pounds, with distinctive waist-length brown hair. Karen Severson had been Missy's best friend since age 8. The friendship deteriorated as Missy grew more popular, especially with boys. The breaking point came when Missy briefly dated a boy named Randy, then broke up with him. Severson began dating Randy, but perceived ongoing slights when he tried to reconnect with Missy. Severson spread rumors about Missy, convinced Randy to throw lit firecrackers at her, and 10 days before the events in the canyon, attacked her with a broken beer bottle. Severson had a 2-year-old daughter at the time. Laura Doyle also harbored resentment toward Missy. In July 1985, Laura saw Missy with her ex-boyfriend Victor Amaya and reportedly threatened to end her life. On October 1, 1985, Missy told her mother she was going out with Laura Doyle. They drove approximately 45 minutes to the Colby Ranch area of Angeles National Forest. At the remote creek location, Severson and Doyle began berating Missy, accusing her of sleeping with their boyfriends. According to federal court documents, Doyle grabbed Missy's hair and wrist, pulling her toward the creek. Missy was gagged and her hands tied behind her back. Severson and Doyle held Missy's face down in approximately 6 inches of water until she stopped moving. Her earrings were yanked off, tearing her ear. Her waist-length hair was hacked off with a knife. A log 4 to 5 feet long and approximately 100 pounds was placed on her body. 4 hours later, Doyle called the Avila home and fabricated a story about dropping Missy off with 3 boys in a blue Camaro. Missy's body was found by hikers on October 4th. For nearly 3 years, the case went cold. Both Severson and Doyle attended Missy's funeral. Doyle sent the family a sympathy card with $20. Severson's deception was far more elaborate. She visited the Avila home frequently, visited Missy's grave multiple times a week, covered her room walls with photos of Missy and newspaper clippings, and eventually moved into the Avila family, home with her toddler, becoming what Irene called a surrogate daughter. What does it take for someone to stand before a grieving mother, accept her embrace, move into her home, and offer comfort for a loss they themselves caused? On July 26, 1988, Ava Chirumbolo, a 4th teenager who had witnessed the events that day, reportedly guilt-stricken after her brother's passing, came forward to police and told the truth. Both Severson and Doyle were charged with first-degree murder. Prosecution was led by Deputy D.A. Tamia Hope. On January 31, 1990, both Severson and Doyle, now 22, were convicted of second-degree murder. Jurors were not convinced the act was premeditated. Both were sentenced on March 10, 1990, to 15 years to life. Both became eligible for parole in 1997, but were repeatedly denied. At a 2002 parole hearing, Doyle admitted for the first time to coaxing Avila to the location, claiming Severson masterminded the plan. Karen Severson was released on December 9, 2011, after approximately 21 and a half years. Laura Doyle was released on December 10, 2012, after approximately 22 years. As of April 2026, both women are approximately 57 to 58 years old. After release, Severson published 2 books under the pen name Kay Crane and appeared on Dr. Phil on December 17, 2014. In March 2015, the Avila family sued Severson for wrongful death, slander, and emotional distress. In October 2015, California passed Missy's Law, requiring publishers working with convicted criminals to notify victims' families. Irene Avila continued advocating for victims' rights until her passing in 2020. Jealousy drove the attack on Missy Avila, but wealth and privilege offer no immunity from consequences, as the next case demonstrates in stark detail. If you are liking this video and you are not subscribed yet, now is the time. We drop new cases every day. Subscribe so you do not miss the next one. Daphne Abdella. On the night of May 22, 1997, 2 15-year-old teenagers from wealthy Manhattan families lured a 44-year-old real estate agent to Central Park, inflicted over 30 stab wounds, disemboweled him, and pushed his body into the lake. Daphne Abdella was intoxicated, privileged, and convinced that her family's money would shield her from accountability. The tabloids would call them the baby-faced butchers. Daphne Abdella was adopted as an infant by Angelo Abdella, an Israeli-born executive at CFC International, and Catherine Abdella, a French-born model. The family lived in a lavish apartment at the majestic 115 Central Park West. Despite this privilege, Daphne was described as troubled and belligerent. She was expelled from Columbia Grammar and Preparatory School in 8th grade for aggressive behavior, had been drinking alcohol excessively since age 12, and entered a substance abuse treatment facility in March 1997. Christopher Vasquez was a working-class youth from East Harlem, a former altar boy and Boy Scout diagnosed with agoraphobia at age 9 and prescribed medication. He met Abdella through rollerblading in Central Park. Michael McMorrow, 44, was a real estate agent who lived with his elderly mother on the Upper West Side. Known by the nickname Irish, he was a regular in Central Park and was acquainted with Abdella through an Alcoholics Anonymous program. On the evening of May 22nd, Abdella and Vasquez went rollerblading in Central Park. Earlier that evening, Abdella told friends she was going to harm someone that night. She showed Vasquez a switchblade. Both had been drinking. They encountered McMorrow near Strawberry Fields and convinced him to come with them to the lake area to continue drinking. After swimming, the precise trigger for what followed is disputed. The most cited account holds that McMorrow put his arm around Abdella, prompting Vasquez's jealousy. Abdella kicked McMorrow's legs out, using her rollerblades, causing him to fall. Vasquez attacked with a knife. McMorrow was stabbed 30 to 38 times in his face, neck, chest, and hands. Abdella reportedly told Vasquez to gut McMorrow so his body would sink, saying he was heavy and would sink. McMorrow's abdomen was cut open, his intestines exposed, his hands nearly severed. They filled the body with stones and pushed it into the lake, then burned his wallet. Shortly after midnight, Abdella made what she intended as an anonymous call reporting a body in the lake. Police traced the call to the Abdella apartment, where officers found both teenagers in the laundry room washing blood off themselves. Can money and opportunity truly insulate someone from the darkest impulses, or do they simply mask problems that fester beneath the surface? Abdella's wealthy parents hired Benjamin Braffman, one of New York's most prominent defense attorneys. On March 11th, 1998, Abdella pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter, admitting she participated in the assault and kicked McMorrow's feet out from under him. She was sentenced on April 2nd, 1998, to 3 1/3 to 10 years. Vasquez went to trial, was found guilty of first-degree manslaughter on December 4th, 1998, but acquitted of second-degree murder as the jury could not determine who was the primary attacker. He received the same sentence. Both were denied parole at least twice. In August 2002, the parole board denied Abdella, citing total disregard for human life. In January 2004, both were released on parole. Abdella quickly violated parole by assaulting a fellow halfway house resident and making threats to a former jailmate. She was returned to prison and served the remainder of her maximum sentence, for a total of approximately 9 years. As of April 2026, Daphne Abdella is approximately 43 to 44 years old. In April 2024, she was photographed walking out of a Starbucks in New York City using a cane. She was identified as living on City Island in the Bronx, approximately 13 miles from Central Park. Neighbors were aware of her criminal past. Vasquez was traced to Mount Vernon in 2024. When approached by reporters, he said he just wants to live his life and let the past be the past. The Central Park case shocked New York in the late 90s, but in Nevada, a drug deal gone wrong would claim the life of a 3-year-old child. Monique Maestas. On January 22, 2003, in Mesquite, Nevada, 16-year-old Monique Maestas and her 19-year-old brother, Bo Santino Maestas, forced their way into a trailer and attacked 2 young girls with butcher knives. A 3-year-old was fatally wounded. Her half-sister, 10 years old, was left permanently paralyzed from the waist down. The motive? Their mother's boyfriend had sold the Maestas siblings salt in place of $125 worth of methamphetamine. Christiana Cowan was 3 years old, 39 inches tall, and weighed 32 pounds. She passed away from multiple wounds to her head, throat, and back, including one that punctured her skull and penetrated her brain. Brittany Bergeron was 10 years old. She survived approximately 20 wounds, including injuries to her stomach, liver, and spine. She was left paralyzed from the waist down. By sentencing in 2006, she was 14, living with a foster mother, attending high school, and playing wheelchair tennis. Both girls were daughters of Tamara Bergeron, who had left them alone in the trailer while she and boyfriend Robert Schmidt gambled at a casino. The Maestas siblings had an extraordinarily troubled upbringing. Their father, Harry Maestas, was a twice-convicted violent offender who spent most of his life in Utah prisons. Their mother was a drug dealer. Their sister Misty testified the children were products of abuse. Public defender Alzora Jackson presented evidence of years of abuse during Monique's childhood. Both siblings were under the influence of methamphetamine at the time of the attack. After discovering their $125 purchase was actually salt, the siblings went to the trailer of Sabrina Bantam, Bo's girlfriend. Bo asked for something sharp, saying they had been ripped off. Bantam borrowed 5 knives from her chef father and drove the siblings to the Casa Blanca employee parking lot. Bo knocked on the Bergeron and Schmidt trailer, but only Christiana and Brittany were home. When 10-year-old Brittany refused to open the door for strangers, Monique approached and lied, telling her that her mom had been hurt really bad and she needed to come with them. The child opened the door. Both siblings attacked with butcher knives. Bantam's testimony revealed Monique said she was trying to hit major organs and should have gone for the neck, but was too scared. The siblings fled to Utah, discarding bloody knives and clothing onto an abandoned gas station roof in Fillmore. What level of rage or desperation leads someone to harm children over a drug deal worth barely more than $100? Both were charged with first-degree murder, attempted murder, burglary with a weapon, and conspiracy. Bo pleaded guilty to murder and attempted murder. A jury sentenced him to death in August 2005. Monique, tried as an adult despite being 16, pleaded guilty on the same. day the death penalty verdict came in against her brother. She was not eligible for the death penalty due to her age. On October 5, 2006, Judge Donald Mosley sentenced Monique to 47 years to life, meaning 2 life prison terms with parole eligibility after 47 years. The judge noted she could apply for parole at age 63. At sentencing, Monique read a letter of apology addressed to Brittany, saying her heart went out to her, and that she felt in her heart Brittany's future would be better, in spite of her disability. As of April 2026, Monique Maestas was transferred from Nevada to the Connecticut Department of Corrections. As of January 2023, she was confirmed at York Correctional Institution in Niantic, Connecticut. She is approximately 39 to 40 years old. Her brother Beau remains on Nevada's death row. Her earliest parole eligibility is approximately 2049. The Maestas case involved strangers, but the next case involves something far more intimate, a daughter who helped orchestrate her own mother's death to protect a forbidden romance. Tyler Witt. On the night of June 11, 2009, 14-year-old Tyler Marie Witt drugged her mother's drink with sleeping medication so her 19-year-old boyfriend could enter the house and take her life. Joanne Witt, 47, had just filed statutory rape charges against the boyfriend. Within days, she would be gone, and the teenage couple would be found behind a dumpster 15 miles away, having attempted to end their own lives with rat poison mixed into cereal and cake. Joanne Witt was a single mother who worked as an engineer for El Dorado County. Her father, Norb Witt, described her as a gourmet chef and a devoted friend and mother who never had a bad word to say about anybody. A book titled Parenting Your Out-of-Control Teenager was found on her bedside nightstand, a silent testament to her struggle to reach her daughter. Tyler Witt met 19-year-old Stephen Paul Culver, who went by Boston, at a local coffee shop in December 2008, during her freshman year of high school. The relationship became physical within weeks. They used marijuana, MDMA, and cocaine together. Under California law, the relationship constituted statutory rape. Tyler's grandfather later said Culver had a 14-year-old that looked at him as a god and had total control over her. Tyler convinced her mother to let Culver rent their spare bedroom, telling Joanne he was gay. After Joanne discovered the truth, finding Tyler undressed in Culver's closet, she ordered him out. In early June 2009, Joanne discovered Tyler's diary containing explicit details about Culver. She took the diary to law enforcement and filed a statutory rape report. A detective contacted Culver, who denied everything. On June 10th, Joanne told Tyler over dinner about the charges being filed. Tyler went into a full-blown panic attack and told Culver. Both believed the diary evidence made convictions certain. They devised a plan: drug Joanne, end her life, then flee to San Francisco for a Romeo and Juliet ending. On the night of June 11th, Tyler poured her mother a drink spiked with sleeping medication. Once Joanne fell asleep, Tyler let Culver into the house. They turned down the air conditioning to slow decomposition. Tyler testified that both went to Joanne's bedroom with knives, but she could not bring herself to act. She stood outside the door with her hands on her ears, eyes closed, humming. She heard her mother begging Culver to stop. Culver emerged with blood-soaked pants. Joanne suffered 20 wounds to her face, neck, and arms, and her throat was cut. Male DNA found under Joanne's fingernails supported Tyler's account. The pair fled to San Francisco, where they attempted to end themselves with a mixture of breakfast cereal, cake, and rat poison. What depth of obsession convinces a teenager that the only way to protect a relationship is to eliminate the parent trying to save her from it? Joanne's supervisor noticed her absence from work. On June 15th, deputies discovered her body. On June 16th, Tyler and Culver were found by San Bruno police behind a dumpster at a strip mall, 15 miles south of San Francisco. In September 2010, Tyler accepted a plea deal. Her charge was reduced from first-degree to second-degree murder in exchange for testifying against Culver. reducing her sentence from 25 years to life to 15 years to life. Culver's trial ran from May 17th to June 15th, 2011. He claimed Tyler committed the act alone and testified she had dissociative identity disorder with 3 souls. The jury rejected this. On June 15, 2011, Culver was found guilty of first-degree murder with special circumstances after less than 4 hours of deliberation. Judge Daniel B. Proud sentenced Culver to life without parole and upheld Tyler's 15 years to life. Tyler served her sentence at Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla. On August 26, 2022, she was granted parole by the California Board of Parole Hearings. She was released in 2023 after serving approximately 13 years, at age 27 to 28. As of April 2026, Tyler Witt, now approximately 30 to 31 years old, is free. She reportedly goes by Charlie and has given at least one podcast interview post-release. Stephen Culver remains incarcerated at the California Healthcare Facility in Stockton, serving life without parole. The case raises institutional accountability questions. The statutory rape investigation did not move quickly enough to prevent the tragedy, despite Joanne having turned diary evidence over to police days before her death. While Tyler's actions were rooted in romantic obsession, the next case involves a different kind of destruction, one that unfolded at high speed on an Ohio roadway. Mackenzie Shirilla. On July 31, 2022, at approximately 5:30 in the morning, 17-year-old Mackenzie Shirilla deliberately accelerated her Toyota Camry to speeds exceeding 100 miles per hour and crashed into the Plidco building, a brick structure in Strongsville, Ohio. Both passengers, her boyfriend Dominic Russo, 20, and their friend Davion Flanagan, 19, perished instantly. Shirilla survived with severe injuries. The judge at her bench trial called her crime a mission executed with precision. Dominic Russo was a 20-year-old Strongsville High School graduate and business owner. He had dated Shirilla for approximately 4 years in a turbulent relationship. Davion Flanagan, 19, was a school athlete, adopted at age 8 by his guardian, Jamie Flanagan. His family established the Davion Flanagan Memorial Scholarship for aspiring barbers. Mackenzie Shirilla was a recent high school graduate and popular social media personality with a large TikTok following. In the 6 months before the crash, the relationship with Russo grew increasingly volatile. Russo's mother, Christine, reported multiple instances of Shirilla's abusive behavior. In July 2022, a family friend sent to pick up Russo witnessed Shirilla screaming that she was going to wreck the car right then while trying to hit him. On the night of July 30th into 31st, Shirilla, Russo, and Flanagan attended a graduation party, then went to a friend's house where they listened to music and smoked marijuana until approximately 5:30 in the morning. At 5:34, CCTV footage captured Shirilla's Toyota Camry turning slowly and in controlled fashion onto Progress Drive. 1 minute later, a second camera captured the car speeding at the end of Progress Drive, crossing the T intersection with Alameda Drive, and slamming directly into the corner of the Plidco building's brick wall at over 100 miles per hour. The corner of the brick wall struck the passenger side with devastating precision. First responders found all 3 unconscious, not breathing, and trapped. Shirilla's foot was still pressing the accelerator. Russo and Flanagan were pronounced dead at the scene. One officer called it the worst crash he had ever seen. How does a court determine whether a fatal car accident was a moment of reckless driving or a deliberate act designed to end lives? Initially treated as a potential accident, a mechanical expert confirmed the car was fully operational. GPS data revealed Shirilla had visited the same industrial area 3 days before the crash, interpreted as reconnaissance. The crash occurred at an hour when streets would be deserted, on a route she did not routinely use. After her hospital discharge, Shirilla was arrested on November 4, 2022, and charged with 17 crimes including aggravated murder, felonious assault, aggravated vehicular homicide, drug possession, drug trafficking, and possessing criminal tools. Psilocybin mushrooms and a digital scale were found in her possession. Defense attorney James McDonnell chose a bench trial before Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Judge Nancy Margaret Russo. The trial began August 7, 2023. The prosecution presented CCTV footage, GPS data, relationship evidence, and social media posts showing lack of remorse, including TikTok videos from her hospital bed, saying she was just one of those girls that can do a lot of drugs and not die. The defense argued the crash was reckless but not intentional. On August 14, 2023, Judge Russo found Sherilla guilty on all 12 counts after merging, including 4 counts of murder. The judge's verdict statement became nationally quoted. She had a mission, and she executed it with precision. The mission was death. On August 21, 2023, Sherilla was sentenced to 2 concurrent terms of 15 years to life. Angelo Russo told the court that Kenzie took Dom's life in cold blood and made Davion collateral damage. An extensive appeals process followed. The 8th District Court of Appeals upheld the conviction in September 2024. The Ohio Supreme Court declined jurisdiction in April 2025. A post-conviction relief petition was dismissed as untimely, filed 1 day past the 365-day deadline, and in March 2026, the appellate court upheld the denial. All state-level options appear exhausted. As of April 2026, Mackenzie Sherilla, now approximately 21 years old, remains incarcerated at the Ohio Reformatory for Women in Marysville, Ohio. Her first parole hearing is scheduled for September 2037. Her defense team's potential next move is a federal habeas corpus petition. The Sherilla case dominated Ohio headlines in 2023, but 2 decades earlier, an Idaho case had raised similar questions about a teenager's capacity for calculated violence. Sarah Marie Johnson. On the morning of September 2, 2003, at approximately 6:20, 16-year-old Sarah Marie Johnson shot both her parents while they slept at their home in Bellevue, Idaho. She used a rifle taken from a guest house on the property, then attempted to stage the scene to suggest an intruder. She called 911 sobbing, describing an attacker who had entered their home. Investigators would soon discover that no intruder had ever existed. Alan Scott Johnson, 46, was a landscaper who provided a comfortable home in Bellevue, on the outskirts of Sun Valley. He was shot twice in the chest while emerging from the shower. Diane Johnson, 52, was a tax collector, shot once in the head while sleeping. Both were described as caring, protective parents. Their older son, Matt, was away at the University of Idaho. Sarah Marie Johnson, born January 24, 1987, grew up in Bellevue and attended Wood River High School in Haley. She had no prior criminal history, but a history of clinical depression. By 2003, she was in a relationship with 19-year-old Bruno Santos, an undocumented immigrant suspected of gang membership and drug activity. They had been dating approximately 3 months and exchanged promise rings. Sarah's parents strongly disapproved. They had taken away her car, grounded her, and Alan personally visited Santos, warning him to stay away, threatening statutory rape charges that would likely result in Santos's deportation. On the morning of September 2nd, only Sarah and her parents were home. Guest house tenant Mel Spiegel was in Boise. Sarah had a key to the guest house and knew a .264 caliber Winchester rifle was stored in the closet. She retrieved the rifle. The parents' bedroom door was propped open. Sarah entered the bedroom and shot her sleeping mother, Diane, in the head. Her father, Alan, hearing the shot, emerged from the shower. Sarah shot him twice in the chest, above the heart. She then staged the scene, placing 2 butcher knives at the foot of her parents' bed and one at the foot of the guest room bed to suggest gang activity. She placed the rifle's scope on Spiegel's bed. She discarded a pink bathrobe worn over her clothes as a shield, a latex glove, and a leather glove in the trash can outside the house. 2 unused rounds were found on Sarah's nightstand. She ran to a neighbor's house and reported her parents had been shot by an intruder. Can a teenager who has been given every opportunity truly convince herself that eliminating her parents is an acceptable response to romantic interference? Sarah gave multiple conflicting accounts. Bruno Santos was investigated first, but had a solid alibi. Suspicion shifted to Sarah due to her lack of genuine grief. Her aunt testified she would roll her eyes and act disgusted during family discussions about her parents. Critical forensic evidence sealed the case. The discarded bathrobe contained dried paint matching the t-shirt Sarah wore that morning, proving she had worn the robe. It contained DNA of both victims and Sarah, plus gunshot residue. A leather glove with gunshot residue was found in the trash. Its matching pair was in Sarah's bedroom. No blood spatter was found on Sarah herself, suggesting the robe served as protective covering. The case was moved to Ada County, Boise, on a change of venue. The 5-week trial before Judge Barry Wood became a national sensation on court TV. Key testimony came from cellmate Melinda Gonzalez, who said Sarah appeared to confess during jailhouse conversations, and from brother Matt, who called Sarah overdramatic. On March 16, 2005, the jury found Sarah guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. On July 1, 2005, Judge Wood sentenced Johnson to 2 concurrent life terms without parole, plus 15 years for the firearm enhancement. He stated that if this were a death penalty case, she would be a candidate for it. Johnson maintained her innocence. Her appeals history is extensive. Her first direct appeal was dismissed when attorneys failed to file timely. A post-conviction relief petition resulted in the judgment being re-entered, allowing a new appeal. The Idaho Supreme Court affirmed the conviction in 2008. A second post-conviction petition raised fingerprints on the weapon matching a friend of Spiegel's, but this was denied in a 94-page decision in October 2014. In 2017, the Idaho Supreme Court upheld her life without parole sentence against Miller versus Alabama challenges, ruling the sentence was discretionary and the judge properly considered her youth. The U.S. Supreme Court denied certiorari. A federal habeas petition was denied. On October 30, 2024, the Ninth Circuit affirmed the denial of habeas relief. As of April 2026, per the Idaho Department of Souls Correction Offender Database, Sarah Marie Johnson, IDOC number 77613, age 39, is in custody at Pocatello Women's Correctional Center, Unit 4, Pocatello, Idaho. She has been incarcerated for over 22 years. All state and federal appeals have been exhausted or denied. The Idaho Innocence Project has been involved in her case, arguing that DNA analytical advances could prove her innocence. Johnson continues to maintain her innocence. Bruno Santos was later convicted on drug charges in 2010 and received parole in May 2018, potentially facing deportation. Elizabeth Haysom. She had the Astor bloodline, an Ivy League education, and enough family money to never work a day in her life. Elizabeth Haysom was supposed to be America's golden girl. Instead, she helped orchestrate the butchering of her own parents. When police found Derek and Nancy Haysom at their Virginia estate, Derek had been stabbed 36 times and nearly decapitated. Nancy's throat was slashed so deeply, investigators initially suspected cult involvement. Elizabeth Roxanne Haysom was born April 15, 1964, in Rhodesia, to extraordinary privilege. Her father, Derek, was a 72-year-old retired Canadian steel executive. Her mother, Nancy, was an artist descended from the wealthy Astor family dynasty. They moved across continents before settling at their Virginia estate with the whimsical name Loose Chippings. Elizabeth attended elite boarding schools in England before landing at the University of Virginia on scholarship. By all appearances, she had everything, but 2 English psychiatrists had diagnosed her as borderline schizophrenic and a pathological liar. She was using heroin, LSD, and alcohol while still a teenager. Her boyfriend Jens Soering nicknamed her fabrications POTS, perversions of the truth. In the fall of 1984, Elizabeth met Jens Soering, an 18-year-old German diplomat's son. Both were scholarship students. Both were brilliant. Both were deeply disturbed. Their relationship became what psychologists would later call a folie à deux, a shared psychosis between 2 people feeding off each other's darkness. The Haysoms despised Jens. They threatened to cut Elizabeth off financially if she didn't end it. Elizabeth responded by writing letters dripping with hatred. In one, she wrote that she prayed her mother would use a fireplace poker on herself. She fantasized openly about her parents' deaths. At trial, she admitted it had been her fantasy for years that they would die. It didn't matter how. On March 30th, 1985, the plan came together. Elizabeth and Jens drove from Charlottesville to Washington, D.C. While Elizabeth created an alibi by ordering room service, buying movie tickets to Witness and Stranger Than Paradise, and carefully keeping receipts, Jens drove the rental car 200 miles back to Bedford County. What happened at Loose Chippings was savage beyond comprehension. Derek Haysom, 72 years old, was stabbed 36 times, nearly decapitated. Nancy suffered at least 6 stab wounds before her throat was slashed. The brutality was so extreme that the rental car logged 669 miles, the exact distance for the Washington to Lynchburg to Washington route. For 6 months, Elizabeth and Jens acted like nothing happened. They attended classes. Elizabeth went to her parents' memorial service. Then, in October 1985, they fled to Europe using false identities. They were arrested in London 9 months later for check fraud. And here's where it gets bizarre. Jens had been dragging around a suitcase filled with incriminating evidence. Letters discussing the murders, travel receipts, everything. When asked why, he called himself a hoarder. During her trial, prosecutor James Updike forced Elizabeth to read her own hateful letters aloud. The judge said he'd lost sleep over this case. She pleaded guilty to 2 counts of accessory before the fact to murder. 90 years, 2 consecutive 45-year terms. But in 2009, DNA testing excluded both Elizabeth and Jens from evidence at the crime scene. After 32 years in prison, both were paroled in 2019. Elizabeth was deported to Canada. She hasn't spoken publicly since. Jens now appears on German talk shows proclaiming his innocence. Elizabeth's half-brother Howard testified she was still lying. He believes she was in the house when their parents were butchered. 2 brilliant teenagers, 2 wealthy parents, 1 savage double murder that destroyed multiple lives, all because a girl couldn't stand being told who she could love. But this next case involves something far more sinister, because at least Elizabeth Haysom's victims were adults. The girl you're about to meet helped kidnap and murder an 8-year-old child who was just trying to cross the street safely. Terry Lynn McClintock. When 8-year-old Tori Stafford grabbed the stranger's hand to cross the street, she thought she was being safe. The woman had promised to show her a puppy, a Shih Tzu, the same breed Tori had at home. Within hours, that little girl would be beaten to death with a claw hammer, buried under rocks in a remote field. The woman's name was Terry Lynn McClintock. She was 18 years old. Victoria Tori Stafford was a grade 3 student at Oliver Stevens Public School. She had survived a liver transplant at age 5. She had battled lymphoma and won. She loved the color purple, watched Hannah Montana, and adored Halloween because she loved dressing up. She was a fighter. She was a survivor. On April 8, 2009, she became a victim. Terry Lynn McClintock's life began in chaos. Her biological mother was an exotic dancer struggling with addiction. She was given up for adoption, but that didn't provide safety. The warning signs appeared shockingly early. At around age 8, McClintock reportedly microwaved a small family dog until it screamed, a documented predictor of future violent behavior. By her teens, she was using opiates, OxyContin, and morphine daily. At 16, she attacked her adoptive mother with such violence she left her partially blind in one eye. By 17, she had assault convictions across multiple Ontario cities. In February 2009, McClintock met Michael Rafferty, a 28-year-old who repeatedly asked her to help kidnap a young female. He told her younger girls were easier to manipulate. On April 8th, Rafferty showed up unannounced at McClintock's house. They drove past Torrey's elementary school multiple times. Around 3:15 in the afternoon, as children were dismissed, Rafferty told McClintock to prove she wasn't all talk. At 3:32, security cameras captured McClintock approaching Torrey, the only child walking alone. McClintock introduced herself and asked if Torrey wanted to see her dog. Torrey said yes. As they walked toward Rafferty's car, Torrey grabbed McClintock's hand to cross the street. McClintock pushed Torrey into the back seat. They drove north on Highway 401. At a Home Depot in North Guelph, security cameras captured McClintock purchasing a claw hammer and garbage bags at approximately 5 in the afternoon. They continued driving to a secluded area near Mount Forest, Ontario, more than 100 kilometers from Woodstock. What happened next has two versions, both from McClintock herself. In her first confession, she said Rafferty sexually assaulted Torrey while she walked away. She heard Torrey's voice saying, "Make him stop, make him stop." In her second confession, McClintock admitted she delivered the fatal blows with the hammer herself. At least 4 blows to the head. Torrey also suffered 16 broken ribs. 103 days later, Torrey's body was found wrapped in garbage bags under a pile of rocks. She was still wearing her tough girl t-shirt. McClintock pleaded guilty to first-degree murder on April 28, 2010. Life imprisonment with no possibility of parole for 25 years. She won't be eligible until 2034 at age 44. Prison sources reported that McClintock showed not one bit of remorse. In 2018, McClintock was transferred to an Indigenous healing lodge with no fenced perimeter. Public outcry was immediate. She was moved back to a medium-security prison within weeks. Rafferty was convicted after trial and received the same sentence. Life with no parole for 25 years. An 18-year-old woman approached a child, promised her a puppy, then helped rape, torture, and murder her, all because a predator told her to prove she wasn't all talk. But the next case proves that monsters come in all forms because Shauna Hoare didn't target a stranger. She helped her boyfriend kidnap, kill, and dismember his own stepsister, a 16-year-old girl who had begged authorities for help months before her death. Shauna Hoare. She was 21 years old when she helped her boyfriend kidnap, suffocate, and dismember his 16-year-old stepsister. They cut Becky Watts into 8 pieces with a circular saw, wrapped the parts in cling film, then ordered takeaway and played Monopoly. Shauna Hoare and Nathan Matthews, a case that proved some monsters hunt in pairs. Rebecca Becky Watts was 16 years old, living in Bristol, England. She had an older stepbrother named Nathan Matthews, 28. Nathan's girlfriend was Shauna Hoare. Becky had told a school psychologist that Nathan scared her. That warning went nowhere. The relationship between Hoare and Matthews began when she was just 14 or 15. He was in his early 20s. Before they murdered together, They had exchanged text messages about kidnapping pretty petite girls. On February 19, 2015, Nathan and Shauna went to Becky's home while her parents were out. Nathan suffocated Becky in her bedroom. The pathologist counted more than 40 bruises on her body. After she was dead, he stabbed her 15 times. Then they dismembered her body. Using a circular saw, they cut Becky into 8 pieces. They wrapped the body parts in cling film and shopping bags. That evening, they ordered takeaway food and played Monopoly. Becky's torso was found on March 3rd in a garden shed about 2 miles from her home. The remaining parts were nearby. She had been missing for 12 days. Nathan Matthews was found guilty of murder, sentenced to life with a minimum of 33 years. Shauna Hoare was found guilty of manslaughter. She received 17 years. In September 2023, Shauna Hoare was released after serving approximately half her sentence. She was given a new identity for her protection. Becky's family was devastated. Her grandfather said, "That woman helped cut up my granddaughter and put her in bags, and now she walks free." A 16-year-old girl who had tried to report her fears about her stepbrother, ignored, kidnapped, suffocated, stabbed, dismembered. Her killers ate takeaway and played board games the same night. But the next case proves that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who seem perfectly normal, because Natalie Keepers wasn't a troubled teen. She was a NASA intern with a promising future, and she helped plan and cover up the murder of a 13-year-old girl for the thrill of it. Natalie Keepers. She was a NASA Goddard Space Flight Center intern, a Virginia Tech engineering student in the top 15% of her class. A girl who attended science camp and volunteered for youth enrichment programs. Natalie Keepers seemed destined for success. Instead, she helped plan and cover up the murder of a 13-year-old girl because she wanted to feel special. Nicole Madison Lovell was 13 years old. She had survived a liver transplant at age 5 and battled health problems her whole life. She was bullied relentlessly for her weight and her medical scars. She sought escape online. That's where she met David Eisenhower, an 18-year-old Virginia Tech freshman and track athlete. He used the Kik username Dr_Tombstone. Nicole thought she was talking to a potential boyfriend. She was actually being groomed by a predator. Natalie Keepers was Eisenhower's friend at Virginia Tech. According to court testimony, they discussed killing Nicole for weeks before it happened. Keepers didn't just know about the plan. She helped refine it. On January 26, 2016, Keepers bought a shovel. The night of January 27th, Nicole snuck out of her house. She climbed through her bedroom window. She thought she was meeting a boy who liked her. Eisenhower drove Nicole to a remote wooded area near the North Carolina border. There, he stabbed her 14 times. She fought for her life. His blood was found at the scene. She had wounded him during the struggle. After the murder, Eisenhower sent Keepers a text message. "It's done." Keepers drove to meet him. Together, they dragged Nicole's body to his car. While Nicole's corpse was in the trunk, Keepers went to Walmart and casually purchased cleaning supplies. Surveillance footage captured her shopping while a 13-year-old's body was in the vehicle. They drove to North Carolina and dumped Nicole's remains. Keepers took Nicole's belongings back to her dorm room, including a Minions blanket the girl had loved. In FBI interviews, Keepers admitted everything. When asked why she participated, she gave an answer that shocked investigators. "I was excited to be part of something secretive and special." She described herself and Eisenhower as sociopaths. She told him, "You're a sociopath, and I'm a sociopath in training." The jury deliberated for less than 90 minutes. They found Natalie Keepers guilty of accessory before the fact to first-degree murder and concealing a body. She was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Nicole's mother spoke at sentencing. "You knew what was going to happen to my daughter. You could have stopped it. You didn't. You helped. Keepers is incarcerated at Fluvanna Correctional Center in Virginia. She'll be eligible for parole in 2058 at age 62. Eisenhower received 50 years. He'll be eligible in 2066 at age 68. A NASA intern, a promising engineering student, a girl who bought a shovel knowing it would be used to bury a child, all because she wanted to feel special. But the final case in Part 1 might be the most disturbing of all. Because Tess Dam didn't help kill a stranger. She ordered the murder of her own mother, then partied in her house for 3 weeks while the body decomposed in the garage. If you're liking this video and you're not subscribed yet, now's the time. We drop new cases every day. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Tess Dam. For 3 weeks, she threw parties in her mother's house, used her mother's debit card, went car surfing with her boyfriend for fun. Meanwhile, her mother's decomposing body was stuffed in the trunk of a Subaru, parked 20 feet away in the garage. Tess Dam was 15 years old, and she had orchestrated the entire thing. Tess Dam and her mother Linda had a combustible relationship. On her MySpace page, Tess wrote that her life was falling apart and described her mother as an angry, raging, functional alcoholic. In the year before the murder, police visited the Dam home 31 times on runaway reports. Tess repeatedly fled. She was always returned by authorities. She felt trapped. In fall 2006, just months before the murder, Tess attended 3 different schools in 2 states over 2 months. The constant upheaval prevented her from forming any stable friendships or support systems. In late 2006, Tess met Brian Grove, 17, while both were doing court-mandated community service for juvenile offenses. They bonded over their troubled home lives, and they started planning an escape that would require Linda's elimination. This wasn't impulsive. Over several weeks, they discussed how to do it, where to dispose of the body, what to do afterward. Premeditated murder. On the evening of February 3, 2007, Tess, Brian, and a friend named Jared took Linda out to dinner. Throughout the meal, Linda kept calling Tess's phone. Each call irritated Tess more. When they returned home, Tess told Brian, "It's time." While Tess and Jared drove around creating an alibi, Brian entered the house alone. Linda expressed relief that Tess hadn't been there, so Grove wouldn't be visiting. That comment was the last straw. Brian grabbed Linda and choked her until she lost consciousness. Then he got a kitchen knife and stabbed her 18 times, repeatedly in the neck and mouth. The violence was extreme and personal. Their first attempt to dispose of the body failed. They drove to a landfill but got stuck in mud. Their second attempt was equally unsuccessful. They tried burying Linda in a cemetery, but the frozen February ground made digging impossible. They dug her back up and returned her body to the trunk of her own Subaru. For 3 weeks, Linda Dam's decomposing body remained in that trunk, parked in her own garage, and Tess and Brian lived in Linda's house as if nothing had happened. They threw parties with unsuspecting friends, used Linda's debit card for purchases, went car surfing for fun. Friends who visited noticed a terrible smell but assumed it was trash or a dead animal. Nobody suspected the truth. On February 28th, a suspicious friend called police. When officers opened the garage, the smell was overwhelming. Linda had been dead for approximately 3 weeks, stabbed 18 times, stuffed in her own trunk while her daughter partied 20 feet away. Brian Grove pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. He received 40 years. Tess was charged as both a juvenile and an adult. She pleaded guilty and received 23 years, 5 in youth corrections, 18 in adult prison. Experts testified that Tess was the mastermind. Brian was the executor, but Tess was the architect. In April 2019, Tess Dam was released on parole after serving approximately 12 years. She was 27 years old. She wrote to the parole board, "It is difficult to articulate the extent of my remorse for the choices I made that cost my mother her life." She changed her name. She lives under strict parole supervision. Brian Grove remains in prison and will be eligible for parole in 2033. A 15-year-old girl ordered her mother's murder, then lived in her house, spent her money, and threw parties while the body rotted in the garage. 3 weeks of casual cruelty before anyone noticed Linda Dam was gone. Valerie Parashumti. She had been drinking blood since she was 10 years old. By 18, Valerie Parashumti had graduated from self-harm to something far darker. And when a vulnerable 16-year-old runaway showed up at her door looking for a place to crash, Valerie saw an opportunity she couldn't resist. Stacey Mitchell was from Dorset, England. 16 years old, sweet, trusting. She'd had an argument with her parents and run away. A mutual friend suggested she could stay with Valerie Parashumti and her girlfriend Jessica Stasinowski for a few days. Stacey had known them for exactly 3 days when they decided to kill her. But here's where this case gets truly disturbing. Parashumti and Stasinowski didn't just kill Stacey. They tried to kill her multiple times first, and failed. First, they poured cooking oil all over the bathroom floor. The plan was simple. Stacey would slip, crack her skull, and die. They would claim it was an accident. But Stacey didn't fall. Next, they crushed glass into tiny pieces and mixed it into Stacey's drink. They hoped she would swallow it and bleed internally. Either she didn't drink it, or it wasn't enough to cause serious harm. Each failed attempt only made them more determined. On December 17, 2006, they decided to stop being subtle. First, they gave Stacey sleeping pills. As she became drowsy and defenseless, Parashumti crept up behind her with a concrete paving slab. She bludgeoned Stacey's head so many times, and with such force that the concrete slab broke into pieces. While Parashumti swung the concrete, Stasinowski strangled Stacey with a dog chain belt, pulling it tight around her neck. The attack lasted 45 minutes, far longer than needed to kill anyone. They prolonged it deliberately. And here's the detail that made investigators physically sick. During the murder, both women became sexually aroused. They kissed over Stacey's dying body. They laughed and mocked her British accent. They filmed portions of the attack on a mobile phone, making jokes as she died. Forensic psychologists would later testify that both women derived sexual pleasure from inflicting pain. One psychologist stated plainly in court, she was sexually aroused by the infliction of violence. After killing Stacey, they stuffed her body headfirst into a household wheelie bin, a garbage bin. Then they put it in a shed behind the house, and then they went shopping. Surveillance footage captured them at a hardware store the next day. Their shopping list included a chainsaw to dismember the body, lime to speed up decomposition, extra garbage bags, and cleaning supplies. They never followed through with the dismemberment, but the shopping list proved just how calculated they were. When police eventually found Stacey's body and arrested the two women, their behavior in court shocked everyone. At their first appearance, Parashumti and Stasinowski snickered and giggled in the dock. The judge had to reprimand them. "This is not a humorous matter. A young girl is dead." Both pleaded guilty to willful murder. At sentencing, Judge Peter Blaxell called the killing sexually perverse and evil. He sentenced both women to life imprisonment with a minimum of 24 years before parole. But he also made an unusual recommendation. The two should be separated for life and never have contact again. Judge Blaxell explained why. There is a real risk that if you are ever together again, you will feed off each other's worst impulses and pose a danger to others. Parashumti will be eligible for parole in 2030. She'll be around 42 years old. Whether she gets out depends on whether the parole board believes she's no longer a threat. Given the sexual sadism component of her crime, many experts doubt she'll ever be released. But Australia isn't the only country that's produced teenage killers who shocked the world. In Argentina, a beautiful law student with thousands of Instagram followers would commit a murder so calculated and then post about it so coldly that she became the youngest woman in the country's history to receive a life sentence. Nahir Galarza. She posted the tribute while his body was still warm. Hours after shooting her boyfriend twice, Nahir Galarza uploaded a photo of them together to Instagram with the caption, "5 years together, fighting, going forward and coming back, but always with the same love. I love you forever, my angel." Friends commented their condolences. She accepted them, playing the grieving girlfriend while knowing exactly what she had done. Nahir Galarza was 19 years old, a first-year law student, a competitive field hockey player, thousands of Instagram followers. Her father was a provincial police officer who worked undercover in dangerous drug cases. By all outward appearances, she had the perfect life. Fernando Pastorizo was 20, her on-again, off-again boyfriend since she was around 14. They dated for 5 years. The relationship was passionate but volatile. They fought constantly, broke up repeatedly, but always got back together. Until Fernando decided he was done. In the weeks before his death, Fernando had been pulling away, spending more time with friends, responding to Nahir's messages less and less. For someone accustomed to being the center of his world, this was unacceptable. Text messages recovered from both phones showed Nahir becoming increasingly desperate, then increasingly angry. December 29, 2017, around 5:15 in the morning, Fernando was riding his motorcycle through the streets of Gualeguaychú. Nahir was with him. At some point, she got off the motorcycle. Moments later, she shot him twice with her father's 9mm Bersa Thunder service pistol. The first bullet entered Fernando's back. The second struck his chest from about 50 centimeters away. Close range, deliberate. Fernando collapsed on the street. Nahir walked 20 blocks home, returned the gun to where she'd taken it from her father's belongings, and went to bed. A passing motorist found Fernando's body around 6 in the morning. He was pronounced dead at the scene. And then came the Instagram post. Later that morning, before police had publicly identified the victim, Nahir uploaded a photo of her and Fernando smiling together. "5 years together. I love you forever, my angel." The post went viral. Condolences poured in. Nahir accepted them all, playing the role of devastated girlfriend while knowing she had killed him just hours earlier. Police initially suspected Nahir's father after ballistics traced the bullets to his service weapon, but security camera footage told a different story. The cameras captured someone matching Nahir's description, walking 6 blocks from the crime scene shortly after the estimated time of death. That evening, as pressure mounted, Nahir confessed, "Enough, it was me, it was me, it was me. Take responsibility away from my father and my family." At trial, Nahir claimed the gun accidentally discharged. Twice. She said Fernando had been violent, that they were fighting, that the gun went off during a struggle. The prosecution destroyed this defense methodically. Ballistics expert Javier Azcu testified, "In my years of experience, I have never seen or heard of any person shooting twice by accident. The gun does not fire on its own." The wound trajectory showed the second shot was fired from 50 centimeters away. Too far to be part of any struggle. Fernando was likely already down from the first shot when she fired the second, and Fernando had no defensive wounds, no evidence of any fight. This wasn't self-defense. This was an execution. On July 3, 2018, Nahir Galarza was convicted of aggravated murder. At 19 years, 7 months, and 21 days old, she became the youngest woman in Argentine history to receive a life sentence. In Argentina, that means a minimum of 35 years before parole eligibility. But the story didn't end there. After conviction, Nahir made explosive allegations. She claimed her father was the actual killer, that he murdered Fernando in a jealous rage and forced her to take the blame. She provided no evidence. The court rejected this claim. She has never shown public remorse for Fernando's death. She maintains she was either acting in self-defense or that her father was the real killer. The evidence supports neither version. In 2024, Amazon Prime Video released a dramatized film about the case that portrayed Nahir sympathetically. Fernando's family condemned it. They are profiting from our son's murder and turning his killer into a celebrity. Nahir Galarza will not be eligible for parole consideration until 2053. She'll be 55 years old. Given the high-profile nature of the case and her complete lack of remorse, many legal experts believe she'll serve far longer than the 35-year minimum, possibly her entire natural life. But if you think posting on Instagram hours after killing your boyfriend is cold, wait until you hear about the Tennessee mother who killed her own toddler, hid the body, and spent months making TikToks and going on vacation while the entire state searched for her missing child. Megan Boswell. For 2 months, no one saw Evelyn Mae Boswell. Her mother always had an excuse. She's sleeping. She's with her father. She's sick. She's with a babysitter. Meanwhile, the 15-month-old's body was stuffed inside a trash can, wrapped in aluminum foil and plastic bags, hidden in a playhouse. And Megan Boswell was making TikToks. Megan Boswell was 17 when she gave birth to Evelyn Mae Boswell on December 26, 2018. She was still legally a child herself when she became a mother. From the start, Megan struggled. She showed limited interest in Evelyn, often leaving her with relatives for extended periods. Friends and family noticed she seemed more interested in partying and dating than caring for her daughter. Evelyn was a beautiful toddler with blonde hair and blue eyes. She loved playing with toys, watching Cocomelon, spending time with her grandmother. She was beginning to walk and speak her first words. She should have had her entire life ahead of her. The last confirmed sighting of Evelyn by anyone other than Megan was December 10th or 11th, 2019. After that, she vanished. But nobody reported her missing. For approximately 2 months, Megan made excuses whenever family members asked to see Evelyn. She's sleeping. She's with her father. She's sick. You can't visit. I'll bring her by next week. 2 months of lies. On February 18th, 2020, Megan's grandfather finally reported Evelyn missing. He had become suspicious after months of never seeing his great-granddaughter. When police began investigating, Megan told them over 10 different stories. Each one contradicted the last. Evelyn was with her father, who was deployed with the army in Louisiana. Investigators contacted him. He hadn't seen his daughter in months. Megan had blocked him from all contact. Evelyn's grandmother had given her to a couple for a better life. False. Evelyn was with a babysitter whose name Megan couldn't remember. Convenient. Eventually, Megan claimed Evelyn had been kidnapped. 10 different stories. All of them lies. While Tennessee Bureau of Investigation agents and thousands of volunteers searched for Evelyn, Megan showed no signs of distress. Instead, she took trips to Gatlinburg with her new boyfriend, Hunter Wood. She posted on social media about her relationship. She made TikTok videos. She went shopping and out to restaurants. Investigators noted Megan displayed absolutely no normal parental concern for a missing child. And then there was the housing application. When Megan applied for housing with her new boyfriend, Hunter, she listed only herself and Hunter as household members. Not Evelyn. Text messages showed why. Hunter had made it clear he didn't want to raise another man's child. On March 6, 2020, Megan's grandfather led authorities to a shed on his property. Inside was a small playhouse, one that had been built for Megan when she was a child. Inside that playhouse was Evelyn's body. The autopsy revealed how Evelyn died: asphyxiation through 4 simultaneous mechanisms. First, she was wrapped so tightly in a fleece blanket that it left visible imprints on her skin. Second, aluminum foil was wrapped around her head, covering her nose and mouth. Third, she was placed inside a black trash bag. Fourth, her small body was stuffed headfirst into a kitchen trash can, bent into what the medical examiner called a distorted fetal position. And on that aluminum foil wrapped around her baby's face, Megan's fingerprint. Forensic pathologist Dr. Amy McMichael testified, this was not an accidental asphyxia. The manner of death was a homicide. Megan was charged with 19 counts, including first-degree premeditated murder, felony murder, aggravated child abuse, aggravated child neglect, and 15 counts of failure to report a death. 1 count for each day she didn't report. Her trial finally began in February 2025. After 4.5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Megan Boswell guilty on all 19 counts. At sentencing, Evelyn's great-grandfather addressed Megan directly. You took away the one person in this world who loved you unconditionally. Evelyn would have grown up to be a beautiful, smart, loving person. Instead, she died alone and afraid because of you. Evelyn's paternal grandmother said, you were supposed to protect her. You were supposed to love her. Instead, you suffocated her and threw her in the trash like garbage. Judge James Goodwin sentenced Megan Boswell to life in prison plus 33 additional years. She won't be eligible for parole until approximately 2074. She'll be 73 years old. Following Evelyn's death, Tennessee passed Evelyn's Law. It requires parents to report a missing child under 12 within 24 hours. Failure to do so is now a felony. It shouldn't have taken a dead baby to pass that law. But it did. A mother who killed her own toddler is horrifying enough. But what about a granddaughter who slaughtered the grandparents who took her in, then threw parties in their house while their bodies decomposed in the bedroom? Cassandra Bjorhe. For a week, Cassandra Bjorhe lived in her grandparents' house with their bodies rotting in the bedroom. She ordered Chinese takeout with their credit cards. She smoked weed. She threw parties with friends who had no idea there were corpses 20 feet away. And when the smell got too strong, she just sealed the door with caulk. Cassandra Bjorge was 17 years old, living with her maternal grandparents, Randall and Wendy Bjorhe, both 63. She had moved in about 18 months earlier after her mother couldn't handle her behavior problems anymore. The family hoped a fresh start would help. Instead, things got worse. In those 18 months, police responded to the Bjorhe home 31 times. 18 calls were for runaway incidents. Multiple calls were for domestic disputes. At least 1 call was for Cassandra assaulting her grandmother. At 16, Cassandra was charged with battery after attacking Wendy. She received probation and then continued living in the same house with the woman she had beaten. Despite everything, Randall and Wendy kept trying. The night before they died, Wendy texted family members, "I'm going to bed soon. Maybe tomorrow will be better. All I can do is hope for the best and expect the worst. It shouldn't be this hard for any of us." Those were her last words. Cassandra's boyfriend was Johnny Ryder, 19 years old. He came from an equally troubled background. They bonded over their resentment of authority figures. And together, they developed a plan. Not just to kill Cassandra's grandparents, but to embark on a multi-family killing spree. Phase 1, kill Randall and Wendy Bjorhe. Phase 2, kill Johnny's family members. Phase 3, kill Cassandra's mother. They viewed these murders as liberation, removing the adults who controlled them. April 1st, 2017. Cassandra and Johnny waited outside the Bjorhe home until the lights went out. Confirmation that Randall and Wendy had gone to bed. Using her key, Cassandra let herself and Johnny into the house. They moved quietly toward the bedroom. Johnny attacked Randall first with a tire iron. beating him, kicking him, stomping on him while Wendy watched in horror. Cassandra turned on her grandmother. She later testified she experienced a surge of energy as she beat Wendy. After beating both victims unconscious, the teens duct-taped their hands and feet. Then they slit both their throats with knives. The wounds were deep and deliberate, meant to ensure death. Both victims bled out in their own bedroom. What happened next shocked even seasoned homicide investigators. Cassandra and Johnny remained in the house for approximately 1 week, with the decomposing bodies of Randall and Wendy just rooms away. During that week, they ordered Chinese takeout using the Bjorhe's credit cards. They smoked marijuana throughout the house. They threw parties with unsuspecting friends. They used the grandparents' vehicle to drive around town. They posted on social media as if life was normal. To mask the decomposition, they sealed the bedroom door with caulk, sealed the windows with caulk and tape, poured bleach on and around the bodies, burned candles and incense. Friends who visited said they noticed a terrible smell, but they accepted Cassandra's explanation. Something died in the walls. On April 8th, Cassandra and Johnny drove to Johnny's family home to execute Phase 2. But there were unfamiliar cars in the driveway, visitors they didn't expect. They abandoned the plan, frustrated. Johnny's rage boiled over. He attacked his sister and her boyfriend with a baseball bat. Police were called. When officers noticed they had arrived in a vehicle registered to Randall and Wendy Bjorhe, they decided to conduct a welfare check. That evening, police arrived at the Bjorhe home. They knocked. No answer. The smell was overwhelming. Officers forced entry and immediately discovered the bodies. A SWAT team located Cassandra and Johnny the next day. Both had self-inflicted wrist wounds, apparent suicide attempts that failed. They were taken into custody and charged with murder. The evidence was overwhelming. Tire iron with Randall's blood, knives used in the throat slitting, duct tape matching what was on the victims, text messages discussing the murders, credit card statements, social media posts of them partying. Both eventually confessed. Facing the possibility of the death penalty, both accepted plea deals. Guilty to 2 counts of malice murder, armed robbery, concealing a death, and tampering with evidence. Judge Deborah Turner addressed them before sentencing. "I'm not sure I've ever imagined such a well-planned, despicable, heinous act to be committed by 2 such young people. You didn't just kill these people, you tortured them. You made them watch each other die. Then you partied in their home while their bodies rotted." Both received 2 consecutive life sentences, plus 21 additional years. They won't be eligible for parole until approximately 2078. Cassandra will be around 78 years old. Cassandra's mother, April, gave a victim impact statement. "My parents tried to save my daughter when I couldn't. They gave her love, stability, and a home. She repaid them by slitting their throats and throwing parties while they decomposed in their bedroom. I've lost my daughter and my parents in one horrific act." Wendy's sister added, "Wendy texted me that night saying she hoped tomorrow would be better. Tomorrow never came for her." 31 police calls in 18 months. And still, nobody saw this coming. Or maybe they just didn't want to. But if you think that's the most brazen display of violence from a teenage girl, you haven't met the 18-year-old who live-streamed her attack on Snapchat, pouring boiling water, stabbing, destroying property, all while grinning for the camera. Princess Owusu Ansah. She positioned her phone on the table, hit record, and started live streaming on Snapchat. What followed was a calculated attack. Boiling water, a knife, screaming. And at one point, she turned to the camera and grinned. She was performing. And hundreds of people watched it happen in real time. Princess Owusu Ansah was 18 years old, no prior criminal record, grew up in Royston, Hertfordshire, about 40 miles north of London. To anyone looking at her social media, she was just another teenager. But beneath the surface, Owusu Ansah harbored intense jealousy and rage toward a 17-year-old girl she considered a romantic rival. The victim's name is protected under UK law. What we know is that she was 17, vulnerable, and had some connection to someone Owusu Ansah was interested in. This perceived love triangle was enough to trigger what happened next. On February 2, 2023, Owusu Ansah traveled from Hertfordshire to East Dulwich, about 30 to 40 miles. This wasn't spontaneous. She had planned the attack and brought weapons. She arrived at the victim's home around 11 at night and gained entry. Once inside, Owusu Ansah confronted the 17-year-old. She accused her of sleeping with people's man and demanded an apology. The victim tried to protect herself by pulling a duvet over her body, a blanket as a shield. That's all she had. And then Owusu Ansah did something that would define this case. She positioned her phone on a table and began broadcasting the assault live on Snapchat. What happened next was captured in full. Owusu Ansah grabbed a kettle of boiling water. She poured it over the victim, who was still trying to shield herself with the blanket. The victim screamed in agony. Boiling water causes second and third-degree burns. The pain is excruciating. Standing over the burned, terrified girl, Owusu Ansah yelled, "Don't embarrass me! Don't piss me off! I've got a knife!" She climbed onto the bed. She bashed a silver knife against the wall repeatedly, a display of intimidation. Then she stabbed the victim in the thigh. Throughout the attack, she destroyed sentimental items belonging to the victim: photos, keepsakes, personal belongings. This wasn't just about physical harm. It was about total destruction. And at one point during the live stream, Owusu Ansah turned to the camera and grinned. She was enjoying this. She was performing, and somewhere people were watching. The victim eventually managed to flee. She ran into the street seeking help. She was treated at King's College Hospital for second-degree burns, a stab wound to the thigh, multiple bruises, and severe psychological trauma. But here's the thing about live streaming your crimes. People see them. A viewer watching the Snapchat live stream immediately contacted police while the attack was still happening. That quick action may have saved the victim from even worse injuries. 3 days later, police arrested Owusu Ansah at her home. The evidence was overwhelming. They had the entire attack on video. Multiple witnesses had watched it live. Digital forensics recovered the full footage even though she tried to delete it. On March 6, 2023, Owusu Ansah appeared at Woolwich Crown Court before Judge Vanessa Barretzer, the same judge who presided over Julian Assange's extradition proceedings. Faced with video evidence of her crime broadcast to potentially hundreds of people, Owusu Ansah had no viable defense. She pleaded guilty to grievous bodily harm with intent and criminal damage. Judge Barretzer stated, "It was made significantly worse by the fact that you put the footage on a social media site so that friends and family would be able to view it." The live stream wasn't just documentation. It was deliberate humiliation, a way to traumatize not just the victim, but everyone who knew her. Judge Barretzer sentenced Owusu Ansah to 3 years in a young offenders institution. The sentence sparked intense debate. Critics called it a slap on the wrist. 3 years for pouring boiling water on someone and stabbing them. The victim has lifelong scars. The attacker gets 3 years. Under UK sentencing norms, she was eligible for release after serving just half her sentence, 18 months. By late 2024, Princess Owusu Ansah was likely a free woman, subject to probation, a restraining order, and potential restrictions on social media use, but free nonetheless. The victim still lives with second-degree burn scars that will likely be permanent, a visible stab wound scar, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, trust issues, and the knowledge that her torture was broadcast live for entertainment. Owusu Ansah isn't alone. She's part of a growing trend of attackers live streaming violence on social media. School fights on Instagram, assaults on Facebook Live, attacks posted to TikTok. The motivations are disturbing. Public humiliation, seeking validation from viewers, demonstrating power to peers, creating a permanent record to intimidate victims. The fact that one viewer called police shows the positive potential of witnesses. But it also raises a darker question. How many people watched without doing anything at all? 10 cases, 10 teenage girls, 10 acts of violence that shocked investigators, traumatized families, and left communities asking the same question. How did we miss this? The only thing they had in common. They proved that evil doesn't have an age requirement. If you made it this far, subscribe, because the stories we cover next are even darker. Click here for the next video.